So we got a call for a half-ton Chevy truck that is stuck on Boulder Mountain. Last fall of 2019, it slid off the road.
The southwest corner of Utah and northern Arizona, Nevada, and we just rescue rental cars and overlanders and people who rent side-by-sides. And Matt Wetzel, the face behind Matt's Off-Road Recovery, is known across the internet as a man who never gives up, no matter how tough the terrain gets. His bright smile, fearless rescues, and can-do attitude have earned him millions often around the world. To his audience, he's the guy who shows up when everything goes wrong. The rescuer who brings stranded travelers back to safety from the most hopeless situations. But behind the calm confidence and the roaring engines, there lies a much deeper story. A story not often seen in the glossy videos or the smiling thumbnails. A story about a man who has faced heartbreak, betrayal, and overwhelming challenges, all while trying to stay true to who he is. This isn't just about pulling cars out of the sand, but it's about pulling himself through the storms of life that threaten to break him. When Matt first began taking calls for vehicle recoveries back in 2009, the odds were completely stacked against him. He didn't have the high-tech rigs or advanced equipment that now define his operation. In those early days, it was just Matt, a truck, a few cables, and a heart full of determination. The work was grueling. He would drag heavy cables through scorching sand, pull by hand when machines failed, and often spend hours on a single job. Sometimes it felt like he was fighting the desert itself. The sand didn't just swallow vehicles. It swallowed time, energy, and hope. Yet, every time the sun set on another exhausting day, Matt found himself getting up the next morning to do it all over again. Sand Hollow and the surrounding deserts of Utah were both his battleground and his classroom. The terrain was unforgiving. Scorching heat during the day, bone-chilling cold at night, and unpredictable obstacles hidden under the surface. Cars got buried deep, and rescue operations that should have taken an hour sometimes stretched into 10. There were moments when even Matt's trucks would get stuck, forcing him to rescue the rescuer. Each setback taught him something new about patience, precision, and persistence. And though every job took its toll, each success, no matter how small, kept his spirit alive. But helping people out of trouble wasn't exactly a profitable business, especially at the beginning. Even though the jobs could cost hundreds of dollars, the expenses often outweighed income. Fuel, broken parts, torn cables, it all added up quickly. And then there was Matt's heart. Too big for his own good sometimes. He couldn't stand to see someone stranded or scared, and he often gave discounts or even free help to those who couldn't afford it. His generosity earned him loyalty and love, but it also left him barely scraping by. Behind the camera, the smiling mechanic was juggling bills, debts, and sleepless nights, wondering if he could keep the business afloat. The physical grind was one thing, but learning how to share his journey with the world became another mountain entirely. At first, filming the rescues seemed simple. Record, upload, repeat. But the reality was far messier. Matt wasn't a tech wizard. Far from it. He struggled with cameras that wouldn't cooperate, footage that got corrupted, and hours lost to confusing editing software. Sometimes he'd spend entire nights trying to fix a video that refused to export. Every upload represented not just a few minutes of entertainment, but countless hours of frustration. Still, he knew that these videos were the key to keeping his business alive. With time, persistence, and a loyal crew, the channel began to take off. Viewers fell in love with the sincerity of his work, the way he approached every rescue, not as a performance, but as a mission. They could sense the authenticity. There were no fake smiles, no scripted heroics, just real people helping others in real trouble. His yellow Jeep, affectionately known as the Banana, became a character in its own right, a symbol of reliability and grit. The roar of his engine became the soundtrack of countless adventures, each one building his legend in the off-road world. But with success came new challenges and new pressures. More fans meant higher expectations. More vehicles meant more maintenance. And more staff meant more responsibility. The larger his operation grew, the heavier the weight on his shoulders became. Every rescue had to be filmed, edited, and uploaded. The content had to keep coming. And each video had to be better than the last. Suddenly, it wasn't just about helping people anymore. It was about feeding an audience hungry for drama, for action, for danger. The financial strain never truly went away either. Repairs were constant, tires wore out faster, fuel costs soared. And the pressure to keep upgrading equipment never stopped. Matt often found himself reinvesting nearly everything he earned back into the operation just to keep it running smoothly. There were times when he wondered if the success people saw online was real or just an illusion, hiding how close he sometimes was to the edge. And then came the critics. With them came scrutiny. Every recovery, every decision, every video was analyzed by strangers. Some praised him as a hero. Others accused him of being reckless or chasing views. There were people who questioned his methods, his business ethics, even his motives. It was a new kind of pressure, one that can't be solved with a tow rope or a winch. Fame, as Matt soon learned, was a double-edged sword. The same people who celebrated him one day could turn on him the next. And as his audience grew, so did the noise of criticism. The desert could be harsh, but people could be harsher. The mental toll was heavier than any sand dune or mud pit he'd ever faced. Still, Matt pushed through. His grit and determination carried him through countless storms, both literal and emotional. Every mistake became a lesson. Every obstacle became a stepping stone. But even with all his experience, nothing could prepare him for what came next. A betrayal that would cut deeper than any financial loss or physical exhaustion. Despite all his battles, all his sacrifices, and all the goodwill he had built, the most painful blow came not from the outside world, but from within his own circle. It would test his trust, his patience, and his belief in people, and it would leave a scar that time alone couldn't heal. Matt's rise to fame wasn't an accident. It was the product of years of struggle, sweat, and relentless determination. Every recovery he performed was a story of patience and perseverance. And every viewer who tuned in could sense that this man was real. There were no scripts, no actors, no staged heroics, just Matt and his team out there in the heat helping strangers in need. But as Matt's off-road recovery grew from a small-town service into a YouTube sensation, life behind the camera began to change. The channel that had once been a passion project now carried enormous weight. What began as an honest desire to help people soon became a full-time business complete with contracts, employees, and an ever-growing audience expecting entertainment, not just rescues. And that's when Matt discovered that sometimes success doesn't just attract fans, it attracts envy. Among those closest to him was a man we'll call KC. He wasn't a stranger to the operation, nor a temporary hire who came and went. KC had been there since the early days when the cameras were shaky, the cables were frayed, and every recovery felt like a gamble. He knew the business inside and out, the vehicles, the routes, and even the filming routines. To Matt, he wasn't just an employee. He was a friend, almost like family. They'd spent countless days in the blistering sun, pulling vehicles from impossible places, sharing meals, laughs, and stories on the trail. But as the years passed and fame took hold, their bond began to change in ways Matt couldn't have predicted. When the channel exploded in popularity, bringing in millions of views and sponsorship opportunities, Casey reportedly began to see things differently. He wasn't just part of the crew anymore. In his mind, he was part of the reason for the channel's success. He started believing that his presence, his work, and his personality were as responsible for Matt's off-road recovery's growth as Matt's leadership was. At first, it was subtle. Small comments, passing jokes about money and recognition. But soon, the tone shifted. What began as playful teasing turned into confrontation, and what once was teamwork began to feel like rivalry. According to Matt's account, Casey's demands became serious. He wanted a bigger cut of the channel's revenue, nearly half. It wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about entitlement. And as if that weren't enough, the timing couldn't have been worse. Matt was already under immense pressure, facing legal scrutiny regarding his business operations. Investigations, paperwork, and court proceedings had drained his energy and resources. The future of his company and his family's livelihood wasted the line. And in the middle of this chaos, someone he trusted decided to turn against him. The alleged betrayal came in the form of blackmail. Casey reportedly gave Matt an ultimatum: pay him a large sum of money, or risk having private information about the business exposed. The figure mentioned was shocking, $40,000. The threat was clear. Casey held sensitive knowledge about how the business was run. Knowledge that, if made public or used incorrectly, could have caused Matt even greater legal and financial harm. For Matt, it wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. Something that once felt unbreakable now shattered in an instant. The man who had stood beside him through thick and thin had turned his loyalty into leverage. It's easy to forget that people like Matt, those who seem unshakable, are still human. Behind the camera, behind the confident voice, there was a man who felt deeply wounded. Betrayal, especially from someone close, hits in a place that no recovery rig can reach. It gets at your confidence, your sense of safety, your belief that hard work and honesty will always pay off. For days, maybe even weeks, Matt wrestled with that pain. The same man who had pulled cars out of the most impossible traps now found himself emotionally stuck, unsure who he could trust again. The pressure didn't stop there. As word of the dispute began to circulate online, fans and critics alike started speculating. Some tried to piece together the story. Others jumped to conclusions. Social media, as it often does, twisted facts into rumors. People who had never met Matt or Casey felt free to choose sides. Every comment section became a battlefield of opinions. And for someone like Matt, who had always tried to stay transparent and honest with his audience, that kind of public scrutiny was brutal. He wasn't just fighting a legal case or a business problem anymore. He was fighting for his reputation, his integrity, and the trust of his fans. Through it all, Matt did what he had always done best. He kept working. While the storm raged around him, he showed up day after day to do recoveries. He didn't disappear, didn't hide behind silence. Instead, he faced the desert, the mud, and the broken vehicles as if nothing had changed. But inside, he was learning one of the hardest lessons life can teach: that not everyone who stands beside you is standing with you. Sometimes people stay close, not out of loyalty, but out of opportunity. And yet, even through betrayal, Matt refused to let bitterness take control. It would have been easy to lash out, to turn his channel into a platform for revenge or drama. But that wasn't who he was. Matt understood something deeper: that the only way to rise above betrayal is to outgrow it. So he channeled his pain into purpose. Each recovery became a symbol of resilience. Each video a quiet act of defiance against the negativity that had surrounded him. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His work spoke for itself. Over time, the noise began to fade. The viewers who truly cared, the ones who had followed his journey from the start, saw his consistency, his humility, and his heart. They noticed how he never stooped to gossip or fuel controversy. Instead, he focused on what mattered: helping people, building his team, and showing kindness wherever he could. The same hands that had once dragged cables through endless sand were now rebuilding his reputation, one act of integrity at a time. The legal issues eventually reached resolution, but they left scars. Scars that reminded Matt of how fragile success can be, how quickly trust can vanish, and how important it is to stay grounded. Many in his position might have given up, walked away from the business, from YouTube, from the constant pressure. But Matt didn't. He rebuilt,